Sometimes you only notice what you've done after you've done it. And so it was only when I completed all 3 of my big High Holy Day talks that I realized, with a little bit of a laugh, that each one of them begins in the Garden of Eden. A question for my therapist, perhaps. Maybe some part of me is longing for a lost paradise. Maybe it's all about new beginnings. Or maybe it's a reflection of the truth that the most essential parts of being human have always been with us. So for whatever reason, here I go, returning once more these Yamim Noraim to where it all started. Now, God had spent nearly all of the 6th day creating the animals, from the giant elephants to the teeny tiny field mice, to the fierce tigers, Gracie would say, roar, to docile deer. All manner of creatures, great and small, including some peculiar side projects, like the platypus, just for fun. All of this took God until nearly evening time. And in those final minutes before twilight, human beings were formed. And like all newborn things, they came into the world and immediately fell fast asleep. When they first came to awareness, it was already a brilliant and beautiful Shabbat day. They spent their first idyllic hours in the garden, exploring their new home, learning the names of all the plants and animals, and eyeing that mysterious tree over there that looked particularly delicious and would get them into so much trouble someday. As the day went on, the shadows lengthened and the cool breeze began to blow. The sun crept lower and lower into the sky until it appeared to be sinking into the earth itself. And the first 2 human beings huddled together in growing terror. The sun was being swallowed. The sky was going dark. It seemed to them that the brand new world was unmaking itself. And then, rabbinic legend says, at Adam's feet appear 2 pieces of flinty rock, though I suspect it was Eve who first noticed, being by far the cleverer of the 2. He picked them up and struck them hard together. Bright, shining sparks flew. Again, more sparks. Again. And then someone grabbed a branch and they lit a torch, and the flames rose against the night, and they made the first ever Havdalah. Baruch atah Adonai, borei me'orei ha'esh. Blessed is God, creator of the lights of the flame. And above them, the stars began to twinkle and to shine. And they sensed that somehow it would all be okay. Darkness and light, the 2 most primal set of counterpoint images from the depths of our human imagination. How old were we when we first became scared of the dark? When we first learned to worry about the monsters that might lurk at nighttime, when we lay so vulnerable and unprotected? Many nights after we finish our 3-year-old Grace's bedtime routine, just as Anne or I turn to leave the room, she calls out in this little voice, "No dragons? No dinosaurs? No monsters will come?" And we reassure her as best we can, and she pulls her favorite, worn, lavender-scented purple lammy over her head and shuts her eyes tight, tight, tight. One morning, a few months ago, I woke up to hear her crying. I came into her room and took her in my arms. "I dreamed about a monster," she said. And I held her close, and I told her that monsters aren't real, and that they can't hurt her. And she quieted, and then a moment later looked up at me with these big, blue, wet eyes and asked, "Are all scary things not real?" My heart broke a little bit in that moment. Because, of course, the answer is there are a lot of scary things out there. Remember the language that we used for the first year or so of the pandemic? We said, what a strange time. What a weird time. What a topsy-turvy time. How about what a truly terrifying time we've all lived through? Scared of a trip to the grocery store? Unsure about showing up at a family gathering? Unable to come to shul? Who will take care of my kids if I get sick? Will I need to go to the hospital? Will I be all alone? We have borne the tremendous burden of fear over these past 2.5 years, the kind that moves into your muscles, that settles in your chest, the kind that leaves psychological scars, individual and collective, that I don't believe we have begun to reckon with. And yes, it is so much better now. I mean, look at this. Here we are. But for many, that fear is not fully over and won't be for a very, very long time. Add to the pandemic so many other scary things. I'm scared of rising anti-Semitism, of madmen who show up at synagogues pretending to want a cup of tea and then take the congregation hostage. That was just this year. Doesn't it feel like a lifetime ago? Just this year. I'm scared for my family, my friends, my brother in Israel, who never know when the next outbreak of rocket fire will send them rushing to their basements. I'm scared for our nation, where 19 first graders can have their little lives snuffed out at their desk, where no place is safe from being the site of the next mass slaughter. I'm scared for the future of our democracy, in a land that's becoming more and more dangerously polarized each day. I'm scared of environmental catastrophe that no longer feels like something in the far-off distance, but with fire and with water is already changing our way of life and will change our planet for our children and our grandchildren. Now, your list of monsters under the bed may not be exactly the same as mine. But I bet beneath the careful veneer that we all carry with us, you're afraid a lot of the time too. We grown-ups know that scary things are all too real. So how do we live in a world where the darkness feels thick? Where we worry that the world, or at least our little piece of it, might unmake itself before the sunrise? Where do we find the flint, the spark, the torch to hold back the night? The High Holy Days give us a trifold path for navigating fearful times when the book of life stands open and we wonder whether our names and the names of our loved ones are written there. The guidance comes from the Unatana Tokef prayer, and you likely know the words. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, uv'yom Yom Kippur yechatemun, uteshuva, utefila, utzedaka, ma'avirin et roa, hagazerah. On Rosh Hashanah, our fate is written. On Yom Kippur, it is sealed. But tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah still have the power to transform what will come to be. These three things, tshuva, the mending of relationships, tefillah, the cultivation of the inner life of the spirit, and tzedakah, a commitment to increasing justice and goodness in the world, are lamps that can light our way in the dark. Tshuva is about much more than al chetz and apologies to others when we've done something selfish or thoughtless or mean. And it's certainly, I'm afraid to say, not contained in the well-meaning but ultimately comic mass email I recently received that said, "Hi all, now is the season that Jews reach out to make amends. So if you feel I've done anything to upset you this year, please don't hesitate to reach out. My assistant will be glad to arrange a time for us to discuss. Signed sincerely, someone who now needs to make tshuva for sending that email." Nor is it, I'm sorry to say, contained in the Instagram posts filling up my feed with hashtag I'm sorry, hashtag tshuva goals, and hashtag New Year No Me. And if you don't know what a hashtag is, the US wires are in the back. Tshuva is fundamentally about tending our relationships with each other, tending our relationships with the care of a master gardener, noticing where the weeds have grown thick, where some extra water or soil or sunlight or love is needed to help build strong roots. It's about noticing when it's been a long time since you picked up the phone, or noticing that it's been a long time since you put down your phone and really paid attention. It's about making sure that a day doesn't go by without saying I love you, and I'm sorry, and let's try again. It's about expressing empathy, listening deeply, and recommitting again and again to our highest vision of who we want to be in the world with others. It's about weaving together the fabric of our mutuality ever more tightly, about turning toward each other like the cherubim on top of the ark, making a place for God's Spirit to dwell. It's about recognizing, as we spoke on Rosh Hashanah, that it's not good for people, for any of us, to be all alone. If tshuva is about nurturing our relationships with others, then tefillah is about turning toward God and inward to our deepest selves. The weight of living through times like these can sometimes feel to be a crushing burden. Prayer, meditation, reflection, and spiritual practice are all ways to tap into a source of power that's beyond us, of refreshing ourselves in the mikveh of our beautiful tradition, using the living waters of the machzor and the siddur to expand our perspective and reconnect us with our soul. The Talmud records that Rabbi Akiva was once sailing on a ship that was tossed and then ultimately wrecked by a tempest. He survived the disaster by holding on to daf shel sfina, a wooden plank from the ship that buoyed him up each time the waves came crashing over his head. It's not lost on the commentators that the word daf can both refer to a plank and a page, that the holy pages you hold in your hand are supposed to help us to weather life's inevitable storms. One of the most meaningful parts of my first 3 months as this community's rabbi has been a series of Zoom conversations with a sweet young man who came to this community with his family as a teenager. Now he's grown and living half a continent away, but he reached out to me on my very first day, along with his equally good-hearted girlfriend, because they wanted to talk, believe it or not, about God. In particular, they wanted to talk about reconciling faith with life's unfairness, especially in light of her mother's early death from a terrible cancer. We talked about the idea that in Judaism, having a relationship with the divine does not necessarily mean meekly accepting that everything that happens to us happens for a reason and it's all for our own good. We talked about the fact that it's okay, maybe even a mitzvah, to wrestle with God, to cry out, to rage, to speak to God with the holy chutzpah of Abraham and say, "How dare you act this way? Will the judge of all the earth not act with justice?" And we talked about a God who doesn't decide who gets a tumor, or sadly, whose tumors magically disappear, but who beckons, who encourages, who empowers us to continue to live, to really, truly live, even in the face of the unspeakable. When we feel most alone, most confused, and most lost, Judaism offers us tefillah, a place to draw strength, a place to vent our anger, a place to quiet the all too noisy world and listen for the still small voice that whispers an eternal message of hope. And finally, our tradition demands of us that we respond to the world's brokenness by committing ourselves to being part of its healing. Tzedakah, as has often been noted, is not merely charity. As the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, charity is a voluntary act, a generous outpouring of the heart driven by sympathy for somebody down on their luck. Tzedakah, however, is compulsory. It's our sacred obligation to respond to the world's brokenness by doing our part to bring a measure of healing. While tshuva and tefillah give us strength to face the dark, acts of tzedakah are the bright showers of sparks themselves that have collectively the power to drive back the night and maybe even bring a new dawn. Even in my very short time with this community, I have seen so many moments of true tzedakah, of righteous and generous acts of love. I'm thinking of the woman who spent years without fail delivering a homemade Shabbos meal to a Holocaust survivor every week, even when facing her own significant health challenges. Another who through COVID kept up on a regular basis with our community's frailest elders and made sure during those long months of isolation that they knew that they were not alone or forgotten. Of the nurse who devotes dozens of hours a week to resettling refugees from all over the world because, as she told me, that's just my Judaism. Of the couple who sat down with a stranger at Shabbat under the stars and in a matter of weeks have made her part of their family with a permanent invitation to their table. Of the families month after month who gather to prepare and serve Sunday supper or volunteer at Family Promise to help support our most vulnerable neighbors. Of the newly formed circle of congregants, 24 or so raising their hand, at all ages and stages who have committed to adopting a family displaced by war and helping them to reestablish their lives. Of the hundreds, no exaggeration, hundreds of people who show up in this community in ways big and small, usually with no fanfare or credit, and pour their time, their energy, their resources, and their love into making this holy community possible. Tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah are not magic. In the earliest origins of our prayer, which comes from the Talmud, the rabbis say, tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'akirin et ra hagazera, that these three things have the power to uproot the darkness in the world, to wipe it out, to cancel it, to make everything all right. But that's not the theology that was actually passed to us in our machzor. Instead, the text says, ma'avirin et ra hagazera, that they have the power not to cancel, but to transform, to give us the tools to face what comes to with us, to give us the tools that face what comes to us with my two very favorite English words, resilience and grace. I return to the image of Adam and Eve's torch. A single torch, even 100 or 1,000, does not put an end to the night. Instead, it creates a bubble, a space of warmth and light in which we can survive even our darkest hours. Strengthening our relationships, attending to our souls, giving generously and righteously will not ensure that there will not be another pandemic surge this winter. It will not stop hurricanes or wildfires or save school children or synagogues from becoming targets. These things will not ensure that nothing bad will ever happen to those we love or guarantee that it all turns out okay in the end. But taken together, they can make such a difference, can't they? The writer E.L. Doctorow once said that writing a novel is like driving at night. You can only see as far as the headlights shine, but you can make the entire trip that way. That's not just how we write a story. That's how we write the story of our lives. We don't know what's coming around the next curve, what challenge or obstacle, and I must say also what unexpected blessing is waiting for us just down the road. We don't know the full arc of our story, but we have everything we need to keep on going. My friend, Rabbi Jacqueline Cohen, wrote an exquisite Devar Torah this Rosh Hashanah about learning to cope with her husband's diagnosis of epilepsy. With her permission, I share a little bit of it. She writes, "There is simply nothing I can do to control his illness. Instead, all that I can control is how I cope with it. Control how I navigate life's ambiguity. Control how I react when things go completely off the rails. Control how I approach and respond to the world around me every single day. We've assembled as many guardrails as we can," she writes, "from the medication Josh takes diligently each day, to the types of cars we drive, to the tech notifications we employ, to the emergency training we've given our 6-year-old, to the way we lay our heads down on the pillow at night. And because even that's not enough, still, I laugh. I laugh a lot. Some days I put on my roller skates and turn up Beyonce full volume. I celebrate the small victories. I dance around the kitchen with my babies. I put my phone away and read a book before bed. I hold him close. I take deep breaths and rediscover this beautiful planet and remember that somehow in this unfathomable mayhem, there is still holiness and beauty and wonder." So what did I tell my Gracie when she asked if all the scary things are pretend? I said, no, unfortunately they're not. There are scary things in the world. But I promised her that I would do my very best every single day that I'm breathing to keep our family safe. And I mean to keep that promise. And so I hold my little girl close. I pray for wisdom and courage. I try, in whatever small way I can, to make this world a little better, a little kinder, a little brighter for her and for all of us. It's not everything, but it is something. It's me banging 2 flints together and watching as the sparks below rise to meet the stars above. Gemar Chatima Tova.